Hello everyone and welcome to How-FixIT. If your DJI Mini 5 Pro crashed and now has a stuck gimbal, gimbal motor overloaded warning, gimbal calibration error, tilted camera, shaking camera, no image transmission, or the gimbal fails its startup self-check, this guide will help you inspect and repair the gimbal camera assembly. In this video, I will disassemble the gimbal into its main components, including the camera module, roll motor, yaw motor, pitch motor, support brackets, covers, and gimbal signal cable. By following this guide, you'll be able to diagnose gimbal damage, replace damaged internal components after a crash, and reassemble the gimbal correctly to complete the repair. To repair the DJI Mini 5 Pro, you'll need a precision screwdriver set, and for safe disassembly, plastic pry tools and tweezers. For reassembly, I recommend using electronics-grade silicone or a hot glue gun. I've included links to the tools, electronics-grade silicone, and replacement parts in the video description below. I also recommend using a magnetic mat to organize all screws and parts during the repair process. The DJI Mini 5 Pro uses many small screws of different sizes, and keeping each screw in the correct location will make reassembly much easier. A magnetic mat also helps hold small metal parts in place and reduces the risk of losing screws or making assembly mistakes. So, let's get started. Before starting the disassembly, make sure the drone is completely powered off and remove the battery. The first step is to remove the upper body cover. You need to remove the 4 screws that hold the top cover in place. 2 of the screws are hidden under stickers, so peel off the stickers and remove the screws underneath. The other 2 screws are located behind the camera gimbal. Now you can begin opening the drone's top cover. Start from the rear side where the charging port is located. I recommend using a plastic spudger to create the first gap. If you use a metal tool, be very careful not to damage or crack the housing. This step is important if you need to replace the upper shell, middle frame, bottom cover, or inspect the drone after a crash. Cracks in the shell, broken mounting points, or distorted frame geometry can cause vibration, gimbal alignment problems, vision sensor errors, or unstable flight. When opening the upper cover, be careful and do not pull it away too quickly. The upper shell has an antenna connection, and lifting the cover too aggressively may damage the antenna cable or connector. The antenna cable is additionally secured to the connector with UV cured adhesive. This adhesive is quite strong, but it can be softened with gentle heat. If you don't have a hot air station, you can use a hair dryer. Just avoid overheating the plastic parts, because they can deform. Now you can remove and replace the upper cover. Next, I'll disconnect the gimbal signal cable and remove the bottom cover so I can take out the gimbal camera assembly. First, heat and peel off the black protective film. Loosen the screw and remove the metal bracket, then disconnect the gimbal signal cable from the drone's main board. Remove the 2 screws securing the upper front sensor module. Lift the module slightly, but do not remove it completely from the drone frame yet, because it is still connected by ribbon cables. I did not disconnect the ribbon cables from this module because it is not necessary for removing the gimbal camera assembly. However, one of these cables is very thin, so if you are not confident that you can lift the module safely with the cable still connected, disconnect the cable first. The gimbal signal cable is also secured to the body with adhesive. Heat the adhesive carefully and release the cable from the frame. Remove the 2 screws securing the upper gimbal camera mounts to the drone frame. Now the gimbal cable and upper mounts are free. We can move to the bottom side of the drone body to access the lower gimbal mounts. You can place the front vision sensor module back into the drone body and loosely cover the top opening, but do not snap the top cover into place. Remove the 2 screws and take off the lower cover of the drone body. After removing the bottom cover, we gain access to the lower gimbal mounts. Remove the rubber dampers from the middle frame. Now you can remove the complete gimbal camera assembly from the drone body. If the gimbal bracket is stuck and does not come out of the frame, gently press on the side of the bracket to release it. Now we can begin disassembling the gimbal camera. Before removing any parts, inspect the gimbal for obvious crash damage. Cracked covers, bent motor arms, torn rubber dampers, damaged brackets, loose screws, or a twisted signal cable. If the gimbal is stuck, buzzing, shaking, or does not complete its startup self-check, the problem may be caused by mechanical damage, a blocked axis, a damaged motor, or a torn cable. Now remove the rubber dampers from the gimbal assembly. These rubber dampers work as shock absorbers between the gimbal and the drone frame. They reduce vibration and help keep the camera stable during flight. Use tweezers in your fingers to gently roll the rubber lip out of the mounting slot. Remove each damper one by one while keeping the gimbal supported. After removal, inspect the dampers carefully. If any damper is torn, stretched, hardened, or deformed after a crash, it should be replaced. Damaged gimbal dampers can cause camera vibration, shaky footage, gimbal instability, or gimbal calibration problems. I've included a link to replacement gimbal rubber dampers for the DJI Mini 5 Pro in the video description below. Replacing the rubber dampers does not require calibration, but after reassembly, I recommend running gimbal auto calibration in the DJI Fly app, and checking that the gimbal moves freely. Now, let's move directly to disassembling the gimbal camera. Start by removing the small plastic covers from the gimbal. Do not force the covers off. Most of them are held in place with small clips, so use a thin plastic tool and release the clips carefully. The gimbal signal cable is secured with adhesive. Heat the adhesive first before trying to remove it. Remove the two screws securing the camera module using T3 Torx screwdriver. Before removing the camera module, disconnect the gimbal signal cable from the roll motor cable. Release the adhesive first, then lift the connector or flex cable carefully. Use fine tweezers or a plastic spudger and avoid touching the cable traces with sharp tools. Carefully pull the camera module out slightly, but do not rush this step because the gimbal signal cable is still connected to the module. The connector is also secured with adhesive. Heat the adhesive, remove it carefully, and then disconnect the cable. The camera module should be inspected if the drone has no image transmission, blurry video, a damaged lens, broken camera housing, tilted image, or visible crash damage around the camera body. I've included a link to a replacement camera module for the DJI Mini 5 Pro in the video description below. Replacing the camera module is one of the most sensitive repairs. In some cases, normal DJI Fly gimbal calibration may be enough for mechanical alignment. But camera module replacement can also trigger pairing or calibration issues, such as gimbal IMU data error or incompatible gimbal data, if the DJI Fly calibration does not clear the error after camera replacement. Professional service calibration or DJI service tools may be required. There is thermal paste between the camera module and the camera housing to help dissipate heat. This paste can be reused during gimbal reassembly if it is clean and still in good condition. Gently gather and redistribute it to improve contact before installing the camera module back into the housing. After removing the camera module, continue with the roll motor. Remove the 3 screws securing the roll motor section to the camera housing. Guide the gimbal signal cable through the opening, but be careful not to damage the cable connector as you pull it through the motor area. You can now remove and replace the camera housing if it is damaged. Next, remove the 4 screws securing the roll motor. The roll motor is responsible for side-to-side leveling of the camera. On the DJI Mini 5 Pro, this roll axis supports the wide rotation range used for vertical and horizontal camera movement. A damaged roll motor can cause a tilted horizon, camera roll errors, shaking during startup, or failure during gimbal calibration. If the roll axis is physically bent after a crash, the gimbal may also show motor overloaded or gimbal stuck warnings. I've included a link to a replacement roll motor in the video description below. After replacing the roll motor, start with DJI Fly gimbal auto calibration. If the gimbal moves freely and the error is only alignment related, app calibration may be enough. But if you still see gimbal IMU data error or calibration fails repeatedly, the repair may require professional calibration. Next, we are going to remove the yaw motor with its bracket. Remove the 4 screws securing the yaw motor. Next, remove the plastic cover and disconnect the yaw motor cables. Carefully release any adhesive holding the cable in place. The yaw motor controls left and right rotation of the gimbal. If the yaw motor or its bracket is damaged, the gimbal may not turn correctly during startup, may point off center, may shake left and right, or may stop during self-check. Crash damage in this area can also cause the gimbal to feel loose or misaligned, even if the camera module itself is not damaged. I've included a link to a replacement yaw motor in the video description below. After replacing the yaw motor or yaw bracket, perform DJI Fly gimbal auto calibration. If the gimbal still cannot complete calibration, check the cable routing, axis movement, and motor alignment before assuming the camera module is bad. Next, we are going to remove the pitch motor with its bracket. Remove the 3 screws securing the pitch motor bracket, then separate the motor assembly. The pitch motor controls the up and down movement of the camera. This is one of the most commonly stressed areas during a front impact, because the camera can be forced upward or downward during a crash. Inspect the bracket legs and the motor mount. These parts are thin and can crack or bend after a crash. If the pitch motor is damaged, the camera may point too far up or down, fail to tilt, shake during movement, or produce gimbal motor overloaded and gimbal calibration errors. I've included a link to a replacement pitch motor in the video description below. After replacing the pitch motor or bracket, normal DJI Fly gimbal calibration is the first step. If the axis moves smoothly and the motor is installed correctly, calibration may be enough. If the drone still reports gimbal IMU data error, the issue may not be only mechanical. Next, remove the lower bracket with limiter and the roll bracket. Remove the small cover around the bearing area. You can gently push this cover out from the bottom, but do not use excessive force. Remove the 3 screws securing the lower bracket. There is adhesive under the gimbal cable and the roll bracket section, so soften the adhesive before removing these parts. The roll bracket is the structural part that holds and supports the roll axis. After a crash, inspect this bracket for bending, cracks, or deformation. If the roll bracket is damaged, the camera may sit at an angle, the horizon may be tilted, or the gimbal may bind during movement. Now remove the remaining gimbal signal cable from the lower bracket. The lower bracket with limiter supports the gimbal and also acts as a mechanical stop to limit the gimbal's movement range. Like the opposite bracket, this part is commonly stressed during a front impact. If the gimbal moves smoothly after replacing these brackets, normal DJI Fly calibration is usually enough. Finally, inspect the gimbal signal cable. The gimbal signal cable is one of the most important and fragile parts of this assembly. It carries signals between the camera, gimbal motors, and the drone's core board. This cable has several very fragile sections that can be damaged during a crash or during disassembly. If this cable is torn, pinched, stretched, or not seated correctly, the drone may show no image, abnormal gimbal movement, gimbal calibration errors, or the gimbal may fail its startup self-check. Replacing the signal cable usually does not require professional pairing by itself, but after replacement you should check image transmission, gimbal movement, and run DJI Fly gimbal calibration. At this point, the gimbal is disassembled into its main components. In the video description, you will find links to all replaceable gimbal parts. Now you can inspect each part and decide what needs to be replaced. If only a cover, bracket, bearing, or motor mount is damaged, the repair may be mechanical and may only need DJI Fly gimbal calibration after reassembly. If one of the gimbal motors is replaced, start with DJI Fly gimbal auto calibration and check whether the gimbal completes its startup self-check normally. Next, replace the damaged component and continue with the reassembly process. But before starting the reassembly, I recommend taking a short break. A gimbal repair requires a lot of attention, and the reassembly process needs the same level of focus. Give yourself some time to rest, check that all parts are organized, make sure no screws are missing, and then continue with the full reassembly process. Now let's start the gimbal reassembly process. First, install the gimbal signal cable back into the lower bracket. Route the cable exactly the same way it was installed originally. Make sure it sits inside the cable channels and is not folded, twisted, or stretched. Reinstall the small cover around the bearing area. Place the pitch motor into position and secure it with the 3 screws. Before continuing, check that the pitch axis moves smoothly. Next, install the yaw motor with its bracket and secure the motor with the 4 screws. Route and connect the yaw motor cables, then reinstall the plastic cover. If the cable connector does not match, carefully peel it off and try reconnecting it. Now install the roll motor. Place the roll motor into position and secure it with the 4 screws. Carefully guide the gimbal signal cable through the motor area. Reinstall the camera housing. Carefully guide the gimbal signal cable through the camera housing without damaging the connector. Make sure the housing sits evenly and does not press on the gimbal cable. Then secure the roll motor section to the camera housing with the 3 screws. Now install the camera module. Before placing the camera module back into the housing, check the thermal paste between the camera module and the housing. Also inspect the gimbal signal cable connector and make sure it is clean before connecting it. Connect the gimbal signal cable to the camera module, then secure the connector with a small amount of adhesive because it may prevent the camera module from installing properly. Now let's talk about securing the connectors and flex cables. During reassembly, some cables, connectors, and small modules need to be secured again with adhesive. For the best result, use electronics-grade RTV silicone, specifically neutral cure silicone. It stays slightly flexible after curing, helps absorb vibration, and keeps flex cables or connectors from coming loose during flight. If you don't have electronics-grade silicone, the hot glue sticks can be used as an alternative. I recommend choosing durable and weather-resistant glue so it can provide basic vibration support for connectors and cables. I left a link to the recommended glue in the description, but hot glue is less precise, sets quickly, and must be applied very carefully around small connectors and fragile flex cables. I do not recommend using regular construction silicone, especially silicone with a strong vinegar smell. This is usually acid cure silicone, and it can be unsafe around electronics because it may release corrosive vapors while curing. With the connected cable, place the camera module into the housing. Carefully pull any slack out of the cable path to make sure the camera module does not press on the cable inside the housing and sits correctly in place. Then secure the camera module with the 2 screws. Next, reconnect the gimbal signal cable to the roll motor cable. Make sure the connector is fully seated, then secure the cable with a small amount of adhesive. Do not use too much adhesive near the connector because it may prevent the cable from seating properly. You can warm the glue slightly for better shrinkage. Now reinstall the small plastic covers on the gimbal. Most covers are snap fit, so align them carefully and press them into place without force. Before closing each cover, check that the gimbal signal cable is not pinched underneath. Finally, install the rubber dampers back onto the gimbal assembly. The upper gimbal mounts have marks indicating their position. Be sure to install them in their correct place. Insert each damper into its mounting slot and gently pull the rubber lip into place. Do not use sharp tools because the dampers can tear easily. After all dampers are installed, check the full gimbal movement by hand. Now install the gimbal camera assembly back onto the drone frame. First, route the gimbal signal cable along the cable guide on the gimbal mount. Lift the upper front sensing module slightly, place the gimbal into the middle frame, and guide the gimbal signal cable through the correct opening. Once the gimbal is seated, secure the upper gimbal mounts with the 2 screws. Then route the gimbal signal cable to the core board and connect it. Secure the gimbal signal cable to the drone frame with a small amount of adhesive. Now place the upper front sensing module back into position and secure it with the 2 screws. Turn the drone over and seat the rubber dampers into the middle frame. Be careful not to puncture or tear them with tweezers. Before continuing, make sure the gimbal moves freely and the signal cable is not twisted, pinched, or stretched. Put the side button back in place and check for smooth pressing. Next, install the lower cover. Place the lower cover onto the drone body and make sure the latches on the bottom cover are not bent and correctly positioned. Do not force the cover if it does not sit flat. Once everything is aligned, install the lower cover screws. Install the metal bracket over the gimbal signal cable and secure it with a screw. Now install the upper cover. Before closing the top cover, connect the antenna cable from the upper shell and secure it with adhesive. Make sure the antenna connector is fully seated and secured. Then place the upper cover onto the drone body and gently press around the edges to snap the clips into place. Do not force the cover if one side does not close properly. Check for misaligned clips and make sure the latches on the upper cover are not bent. Finally, install the 4 top cover screws. Now the drone is ready for the first test power on. Insert the battery and power on the drone. Confirm that the camera image appears and run gimbal auto calibration in the DJI Fly app and check that the gimbal completes its startup self-check normally. If the gimbal moves freely, but DJI Fly still shows gimbal IMU data error, incompatible gimbal data, or repeated calibration failure, professional service calibration may be required. If you have any questions about gimbal calibration, please feel free to ask them in the comments. If you found this guide helpful, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more tech tips and guides. Visit our website for more insights and do-it-yourself guides. Remember, every tech challenge is an opportunity to learn and grow. Thanks for watching How-FixIT, and we'll see you in the next one.